So, when you suggested we do a deep dive on this whole living to 1000 idea, I have to admit, I kind of chuckled.
I bet.
Like, oh, sure, next we'll be talking about flying cars. But
I,
then I actually started going through the stuff you sent.
yeah.
And I gotta say, some of this stuff is, well, it's pretty wild. Like, are we really talking about, like, never dying?
Well, never is a strong word, but some very serious researchers and technologists are suggesting that we're on the cusp of fundamentally changing the way we age. Like, what if, instead of thinking of aging as this inevitable decline, we start thinking of it as like an information problem?
An information problem. Okay, I'm gonna need you to unpack that one a little bit.
Sure. So much of what we think of as aging wrinkles, weakened immune systems, even diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, it's all rooted in how our cells and biological processes change over time.
Hmm.
And those changes, they come down to information DNA, proteins, all sorts of complex interactions happening at the molecular level.
Okay, so I'm with you so far, but what does this have to do with AI?
Well, that's the really exciting part. Imagine AI so powerful that it can analyze all this biological data, genomes, medical records, you name it, and start to identify patterns that we as humans would simply never be able to see. Patterns that hold the key to slowing down or even reversing some of these age-related changes.
So, like, instead of just treating the symptoms of aging, we're talking about actually addressing the underlying causes, the information that's driving the whole process.
Precisely. Think of it like having a million medical researchers working around the clock. But instead of humans, it's AI making the connections, analyzing vast data sets of biological information.
It's mind-boggling when you think about the sheer speed and scale that AI brings to the table. It'd be like having a million medical researchers working around the clock.
Exactly. We're talking about accelerating the pace of medical discovery exponentially. New drugs, new therapies, all tailored to our individual genetic makeup.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, AI helps us develop a treatment that extends the average human lifespan by, let's say, 20 years. What happens next? I mean, do we just hit a wall after those extra 20 years?
That's where this concept of a chain of life extensions comes in. So we get those extra 20 years. But during that time, AI research doesn't just stop. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It keeps advancing, leading to new breakthroughs, new treatments that could potentially add another 10, 20, maybe even 30 years to our lives, and so on and so forth.
So it's not like we flip a switch and suddenly everyone's living to be on 1,000. It's more of a gradual but potentially exponential extension of human lifespan.
Exactly. We're constantly pushing back the boundaries of what's biologically possible. It's a really exciting time to be alive, even if it is a little mind-blowing to think about.
It's kind of like we're not just trying to live longer, we're talking about actually changing what it means to age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really, I don't know, almost hard to imagine.
You talking about nanotechnology, because that's the next thing I have in my notes here. And I got to be honest, that always felt a little too sci-fi for me, even with all the other crazy stuff we've been discussing.
Yeah, nanobots, right? Sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Right, like tiny robots zipping around inside my body. It's a bit much.
I hear you. But the thing is, this isn't just some futuristic fantasy. Researchers are already using nanoparticles in some really incredible ways.
Yeah, I was reading about that Stanford study using nanoparticles to target, like, heart disease.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning. Imagine, and I know it's a big imagination, but imagine these tiny nanobots, way smaller than even a single cell, traveling through your body, like constantly scanning for any sign of damage or disease.
So instead of waiting for something to go wrong, we're talking about preventing it from ever happening in the first place.
Exactly. We could potentially clear out arterial plaques before they even have a chance to build up, target and destroy cancer cells before they form a tumor. We could even potentially repair DNA damage at the molecular level.
Hold on, slow down a second. Repair DNA. That sounds a little far-fetched, even for nanobots.
It's definitely still early days, but the potential is there. And think about what that means, not just for extending lifespan, but for the quality of those extra years. You're not just living longer, you're living healthier.
Okay. So we're basically talking about a future where, like, I could eat all the cheeseburgers I want. Nanobots would just clean up the mess.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But the idea is that we could potentially mitigate a lot of the damage that currently comes with aging.
That's pretty wild when you think about it. So we've talked about disease, but what about actually enhancing, like, our existing capabilities? Could nanobots make us, I don't know, stronger, faster, smarter?
It's an interesting question, and one that some researchers are actually exploring. Imagine nanobots that could regulate your hormone levels throughout the day, so you're always at peak energy and focus. or even enhance the connections in your brain, making you learn faster, remember more.
Okay, now that's just like next level stuff, but it also feels like we're crossing a line, like treating disease, repairing damage, that makes sense. But actually enhancing the human body beyond its natural limits, that feels different. I gotta say, this is a lot to take in.
Yeah, we've covered some pretty mind-bending territory today.
That's an understatement.
It's true, though, when you think about it. I mean, we're talking about potentially altering the course of human evolution.
It's like, where do we even draw the line? Like, is there a point where we're no longer human?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where this whole concept of the singularity comes in.
Yeah, that one's been floating around in the back of my mind this whole time. Feels like we're edging closer to it with every topic we discuss.
Rightfully so. The singularity is this hypothetical point in the future where, and this is putting it very simply, but it's where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence.
And from what I've read, there's no going back from that point.
Exactly. It's like a technological event horizon. And what happens on the other side? No one knows for sure. But some pretty smart people are suggesting that, among other things, it could lead to the possibility of things like mind uploading.
Mind uploading. Okay, that one definitely falls into the sounds like science fiction, but also kind of freaks me out
There's
category.
definitely a mind bender, right?
Yeah.
But the basic idea is that our consciousness, who we are, it's all just information.
Like ones and zeros.
Essentially, yeah. And if that's the case, then theoretically you could potentially create a digital copy of that information, a backup of your entire mind, and transfer it to a different substrate.
So instead of a physical body, my mind would be like running on a supercomputer somewhere.
Exactly. A digital consciousness free from the limitations of a physical body. Potentially immortal, even.
Wow. Okay. So much to unpack there. I mean, is that digital copy still me? What are the ethical implications of all this? I don't even know where to begin.
And that's just it, right? These aren't just abstract thought experiments anymore. The technology is advancing at an incredible pace, and we need to start grappling with these questions now.
It's a lot to process, and honestly, I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that this conversation is far from over.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation we all need to be a part of. The future is coming, ready or not, and it's going to be anything but boring.
That's one thing we can definitely agree on. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been illuminating, to say the least. Big thanks to you for taking us on this wild ride.
Anytime. Always happy to explore the edges of the possible.
And to all of you listening, thanks for joining us on this journey into the future. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep an open mind.